and a 6th grader right now. So my 6th grader will be going to North Central, and then the following year he'll still be at North Central, and my other one would be at Northwest. And I do not want to drive to 2 different junior highs. What would you do for that?
The choice, while limited for you, would be that the 5th grader must go to the newly assigned school. So your only choice then would be, if you don't want to be in 2 schools, is to bring your other student with the 5th grader. It's not, you're right. There's 2 bad choices for your family. But again, we make these boundary decisions and we've got to have numbers to make these things work. Yes, go ahead.
Has anybody considered the inadequacy of 12th Avenue and the infrastructure in Coralville, which does not allow for the transportation of students from one end of town to the other right now? 12th Avenue is incapable of handling the traffic as it is right now. If we add 128 cars to the road, what's it going to do? Poor planning in city planning structure, but the infrastructure is terrible.
You know, certainly transportation is an issue. I mean, that's all we can say that. There have been lots of discussions about what does this do for busing, what does this do for transportation. What does it do for busing? We know that many kids at Wickham can walk to North Central. The busing parameter that we use, the rule is if you're more than 3 miles away, you qualify for a bus. Okay? And so we've got some of the data on that. We're triple checking that with our busing company. But we will have to transport kids that used to walk. And a bus costs $40,000 a route, $40,000 a bus, and that's something we have to consider. We're just waiting to see if anyone has any other questions or comments about the junior high scenario.
So basically, I think you addressed or talked about many of the Wickham kids are in walking distance to North Central. I'm in the same situation. So from what we are trying to do here, it appears that we are looking at the worst case scenario and trying to change the lives of many families to accommodate something that may or may not happen. Why would we do that? To me, this defies logic. We bought our house where we are today because of the facilities and the how the proximity of both elementary and junior high, and you're changing all of that. What is the logic? I simply cannot understand the logic here.
The best we can say is we make predictions on how many kids we have coming through the pipeline. We can't fit them all at North Central. The board's parameters, and I think we have those up there, Jane, if you want to go back to that folder. The board uses, requests that we have 4 primary criteria that we use in making boundary decisions. Before we add on to buildings, the board says use available space first. And that's the motivation for starting with moving kids to the available space first at Northwest.
But you're changing the equation and creating the problem here. You're not solving anything here. You're just disrupting the lives of many families. It seems like it is a fictitious problem that you're trying to fix.
Well, we do have a situation where we're going to have Northwest under capacity, and so we need to fill that building before we can talk about adding on either to North Central or building additional facilities. So we have to do, this is our first scenario, and that's our point tonight, is to take input on this as to another option that you might like to suggest tonight.
If this is the time to vote, I'm voting totally against.
Well, we're not voting. Thank you.
Let me add this.
And that's what we're asking for. Thank you.
The Jeffrey asked, he's got it pulled up here, and we don't have this on the screen, and maybe, I don't know if we can flip it up or not. But the projections Jeffrey has for North Central in
2016-17, I'm projecting more 7th and 8th graders at North Central than I am at Northwest. So 570 versus 563, so 7 more 7th and 8th graders. Based on the cohort survival method. It's based on grade progression rates. Okay, it's based on grade progression rates in lower grades, so K through 6 going through the cohorts of every time they can gain and lose students. And I'm gonna make the number. I'm gonna present these numbers to the board in April. But right now, based on these cohort survival rates, I'm projecting more 7th and 8th graders living in the north central area than will live in the northwest area in 2016-17.
My question was about short-term versus long-term changes, because when we started at Wickham, there were, and Laura Daly can back up these numbers for me if I'm incorrect on this, but my understanding is that, for example, my child's kindergarten class was 6 sections with very huge classes that are now 7th and 8th graders at North Central. And my understanding is we now have, what, 3 grades of kindergartners with very small classes at Wickham. So are we just going to shift for 3 years so that we can balance things out to then all of a sudden 4 or 5 years from now, we're going to be over capacity at Northwest, and oh, let's take Wickham and let's shift them back again because they're on the table that they could just be moved in at random to suit needs. I feel like, are we looking beyond the next 2 to 3 years to Wickham is going down, and it's more of the outer edges of North Liberty that really those neighborhoods are growing. Has that been considered?
Yes, the answer is yes. With the growth in North Liberty, we know we don't have enough room in North Central. And we're going to run out of space regardless of what we do here. I mean, we're probably going to have to add on to North Central, even if we move students from North Central to Northwest. That's the growth we project in the North Liberty area, north. So, you know, there are other options to do this, and that's why we're here. At the last forum, we had some people say, you know, why would you take the whole school? Why don't you just draw a geographic boundary and take some kids from several schools? And that's something that the committee is tossing around.
Students, and we're not considering them here. Because under your numbers, you only leave 37 seats at Northwest for that area. As you move Wickham here, there are only 37 open seats. And according to what she said, there's not even any open seats for those students. So why is potential growth considered in some areas for some decisions and not in other areas for other decisions?
Okay, so, right, this method we're using is called the cohort survival method, and it doesn't factor in potential growth that may occur at Coralville in the future. But it assumes constant growth in all the areas that have been going on for the previous 4 years. So it assumes the growth and decline that has been occurring in the Northwest Junior High.
Restate that.
Okay, it's
constant growth in the areas that are already developed over the past.
No, it assumes constant growth or decline, so constant change in the current entire district. Okay, so all the attendance areas of the Iowa City Community School District.
Does that include per point? Does it include the lots?
Okay, but I mean, it includes constant growth. So if a large number of lots are built in the Coralville area, it's not included. Right? So there can be surprises, spurts of growth.
How can it be a surprise? The lots are there. We know people are building there.
Okay,
It's
well,
no different than the lots in North Liberty. It's no different than the
That's
lots
true.
on that side. Why are they not being considered?
That's true. And so what I think, I'm taking that one step further, and what you're saying is, don't move all those kids.
I'm saying, why would you overcrowd Northwest again?
We've got to use some space. So I think what I'm hearing, a conclusion I could take away is, not so many, because we've got to use the space at Northwest. Even with the projected growth.
But you don't even know how many, not so many, because you're not looking at it. Nobody can tell me how many students they think are going to come here. There was enough potential students that was built as an elementary. There are enough potential students in North Liberty that we're going to add on to North Central, and we're going to shift kids. How many potential students? How can you make these decisions when you don't know? You have 37 seats under your numbers, and you have negative seats under her numbers. You think you're only
We make the best decisions we can with the data that we have. I mean, that's...
But you didn't even do things like
We're making projections, that's right. That's right. Thank you.
I guess 2 points. I'm curious, after the district expended a great deal of money and energy in hiring a very qualified consultant to look at projections and numbers, why we are not using those numbers, because those were projected out for many, many years. And I think that the theories used in that were vetted very well. And I think that is a fiduciary issue on the part of the school board as to effectively manage our resources, not only in terms of building use, but in terms of financial use. Secondly, you haven't addressed the concept of the feeder schools. And I think everybody in this room is aware of the discussions that happened last time. And the concern of the Wickham parents is that it will become very easy for the school board to say, well, those kids from Wickham are now in the feeder school at Northwest and will now go to City High. And that is unacceptable.
We're certainly aware of lots of discussions happening in the community. What I can tell you is that our charge as this committee is to concentrate on elementary and junior high. The board has asked for options for high school. And that study will begin in late summer and continue into the fall. Our charge is to come up with scenarios that will play into whatever high school scenario develops. And is there potential for, I mean, all options are on the table for the high school as well as options on the table now for the elementary and junior high. But certainly there's discussion going on.
The follow-up question goes back to the demographics that the gentleman is using from the U. And whether, I would be very curious as to whether those numbers in the projections that were made included the potential for development around Borlaug. And I think it is a fatal mistake, pardon me, and I don't mean to impugn your credibility, but perhaps I am, that we are not looking at development, because as I think everybody who's in the Wickham area knows, Wickham built out to capacity and over capacity, which is why Van Allen was built. Again, that's a capacity. And I think you're going to see people in the Wickham area moving closer to West to ensure that they have the ability to go to West. So I think you have to look at that, or your data is flawed.
Thank you. The one thing I would say about RSP, I believe you mentioned it, the thing with RSP was, and what we'll do for the leadership team is we'll dig that data back out and we'll look at it. What we have to do, RSP is proprietary about their data. So what we cannot do is go and use their, like how many kids they predict and then grab a chunk and move them here. They did not give that raw data to the district when they did their study. So anytime we did a scenario with them, we'd say, we want this scenario, and they ran the data, and we say, can we see it? They'd say, we ran it for you. So we can use that, the overall concepts that you mentioned, and the growth areas that they predict. We certainly will do that.
So my question has to do with, I think it's difficult or not a good thing to be looking at the junior high scenario without taking it to the high school scenarios at the same time. One really great concept that I have heard from Clearback when we first started these discussions, something like 7 or 8 years ago, was the potential of creating a 9th grade center at Northwest, using the available capacity to be able to take some of the elementary schools on the west side and use that as a way to relieve crowding at West High without having to force kids to drive across town in an unsafe way. And so I feel like if you use all the available capacity at Northwest to address issues with overcrowding at North Central without considering the high school scenario, you're going to eliminate that as a potential option and a potential solution to the high school situation.
That has been one option that at the administrative level has had some beginning discussion. We're fortunate tonight from the fact that we have 2 of our board members here also to hear this. It would be something that is being used in other large districts across the state. And so we do have some examples we can look at and find out the pros and the cons of it. So
Just so you know, Greg Schultz spent a great deal of time putting together a very detailed proposal, I don't know, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, that had great information in it. And if the current board members don't have access to that, I'd urge you to, maybe Greg still has it, he can send it out or whatever. There's some great ideas in there that I think could be of use today still.
okay, what she stated was that Greg Schultz about 6 years ago put together a proposal, and she felt that there's a lot of great ideas in there and that we should be looking at that and for some additional ideas. Greg, anything you want to add?
Just that if you didn't like the numbers now, you're not going to like the numbers I used 6 years ago. So, you know, that's all I'm going to say.
That's all. Okay.
They were good numbers 6 years ago. They're not good now.
Okay, we have a question back here.
I guess my question is that if you're using all this data, projections, North Liberty, why was North Central built with such a low capacity if you had all this information saying that you were going to have this growth? You built extra elementaries. Why would you have not built that junior high to feed, get the feeder schools to it?
I don't know that answer.
I believe there were some plans. I mean, North Central was built to be expandable. So yes, I don't know why the current size was built. I'm going to take a stab and say because we didn't want to, we wanted to continue to utilize the space at Northwest first, but I don't know that. That's a stab in the dark on my part.
I have a two-part question. I think a lot of the parents here tonight are wanting to talk about the third high school because they believe the conversations that are going on elsewhere for quite a long time and that we're late to this game, that we would like to discuss our concerns fully tonight about redistricting third high school, what's going to happen to Wickham long-term. I think there's a sense that the long-term planning hasn't happened and that short-term planning is happening. Putting the cart ahead, of course. That we'd like to know what the long-term objectives are. Or do we know what they are, and can we put them out there for people to look at?
All different pieces of money. What I can speak to is what the decisions are at this point. The board has the right to make, I mean, they're elected to represent all of us. So they have the right to make a different decision. But the decision by the board 2 years ago, which is not this board altogether, was to build a third high school facility. And to do that when we hit certain trigger points. And that's the extent of the decision. Now, I believe that the board at that time left it pretty open by saying high school facility. Okay? And I think that was intentional on their part. But right now we're talking about a third comprehensive high school. But I do believe, and we all know, that the board has the option to do what they want. So I'm not answering your question. I'm saying is that's the history at this point, and our charge was to look at elementary and junior high, and we accept that that plays into.
I think the frustration is that there doesn't seem to be any long-term, that we're not sure what the long-term plan is and what it looks like. And I think we would like to see a lot more information on that before we start looking at it.
I want you to clarify. You talked about the timetable for the third high school in the city, for high school redistricting, sorry. It's being sometime in the summer to the fall.
Yes.
Now, we understood that the timetable originally was set up to be August, and then it got accelerated. Can you explain how that process is going to work a little more clearly? That it was supposed to be August, now it's going to be June. Does that make sense?
This is for, this is my recollection, and I'm looking at people who were at the facilities meeting that night. When the board said, we would like to see, actually it was a board meeting, we would like to see additional options other than a third comprehensive high school. Superintendent Murley talked about what potential timelines could be on that. The board said, if let's say we don't have a third comprehensive high school. We've got to do some planning, you know, to use existing capacity at City High. So how soon could that happen? Because we have overcrowding at West right now. So one idea thrown out was, we better start soon then, if that's a possibility. And so that's why it was thrown out to start, you know, as early as late summer, and get out to the people and get some forums and hear what we have to say about other possibilities. Now, you know, that's my understanding. Now, you know, certainly.
There's a committee that makes a recommendation. When are they supposed to make the recommendation?
There is no timetable for that decision at this point. I don't think a set timetable.
You told us September.
We suggested September.
Last night, though, it was said that the boundary information was coming back in May. At the
Good point. This committee that's working on junior high and elementary, the plan that we've had ever since 2 years ago when the board said, do this incrementally rather than once every 20 years. And so each year we are doing studies. We did one last year. It was easier last year because we opened a new school, and it makes sense to change boundaries when you open a new school. More sense, let's put it that way. So that timetable has always been get it to the board by May so that a year from the following fall, people can plan. That's when they'll be implemented.
Jeff just corrected me. The boundary decisions in May are for the elementary level. Is that correct?
And junior high. The May decision, the May proposal to the board, then the board starts their process. They may choose to do what they want to do, but the superintendent's recommendation about elementary and junior high comes in May.
Okay, and then we can expect the recommendations for high school boundary levels to come in the fall.
In the fall, September is the month that we're targeting.
Thank you.
And that will be this sort of process. I anticipate, Steve's shaking his head yes, this sort of process. Develop scenarios, bring them to the public, get some action, reaction.
I guess what I'm asking is, has the district considered using the available space at Northwest for the potential career academies that are going to be created with the regional centers? In the partnership meetings that I've been a part of that has included Kirkwood, the University of Iowa, and school districts, one of the things that they're looking for, because the construction will not be done until 2014, is available space in the interim. And they certainly are looking at the hygienics lab and other areas at the University of Iowa, but Northwest being where it is would certainly be centrally located.
We'll be sure to get that recorded, because that's an idea that our leadership team hasn't talked about. But yes, and what we're talking about is, you may be aware of this regional high school center that we're going to open with other school districts in the area, Kirkwood Community College and the University of Iowa. And that will be a program option for high school kids for a half day. And I don't want to get too much into this because that's a little far afield, but what the idea, since the building can't go up till 14-15, the idea would be, can we offer some programs now that both city and West kids, you know, can take part in before the building opens? And so we accept that idea, and we'll bring it back to the team. So the idea is, should we use Northwest for that space now?
The question I have is, if the data that was provided by, even though you don't have the data, projections provided by the consultant, presumably we spend a lot of time and use similar statistical methods, were incorrect. What's to say that using one single scenario for projections is going to be any more accurate and won't lead to this continual discussion? Wouldn't it be more wise to use a variety of different scenarios and try to come up with a midterm, long-term solution that looks at those scenarios and tries to manage a phased approach to handling what would happen should those different scenarios play out? I know the time constraints in building and adding on play into that, but it seems like, not been in the district for a long time, as a student and growing up, these discussions come around, and I remember building a period where we built, and then we had overcapacity, undercapacity, and we shut, and then we built again. Aren't we just continuing the cycle by not considering a variety of options? For instance, how about going out and looking at available real estate space, not just using numbers that are constant growth numbers? There's a lot of things that I think from a data perspective needs to be considered before any of these decisions are
Hey, I've heard people say, you know, we haven't redistricted in 20 years, but as a Wickham parent, this is the 5th time I've participated in redistricting since 2005. And since 2005, this would be the 4th boundary change. And the boundary changes would be Van Allen, North Central, Gardner, and now back to Northwest. And it would seem like it's set up for future changes. So as you think about neighborhood schools and neighborhoods intact, how do you think about that level of change?
I stand corrected, you're absolutely right. There have been changes for the Wickham neighborhood, you're absolutely right. You know, it's a matter of balancing those factors, you know, and that's what our leadership team has got to do. You know, we certainly can consider other schools that feed into North Central. We've already started some of those discussions. And I just saw Tuette Duro, she's a board member, she also came tonight, so we want to recognize Tuette. So, you know, you're absolutely right. Wickham has been involved in lots of changes as we've added buildings. And, you know, I think our team is doing their best to consider the neighborhood concept. But duly noted on that change.
Kind of a question, kind of an observation. I'm hearing a theme here, and it's that this really seems cobbled together. Historically, anything that has come across with redistricting and schools appears cobbled together and not future focused with long-reaching plans that encompass the district as a whole rather than pockets of it that continue to move. Do we need to ask the board to stop this? Take a few steps back, look at the entire district, all of the numbers, look 10, 15, and 20 years into the future instead of 5 years and maybe, and well, we're looking at these numbers here, but not the same numbers over there, to create a consistent plan to move forward so that we aren't doing this every 2 to 5 years and really not achieving anything. Because all of this seems like fluff to me. Because there are no answers, you're not looking at everything as a big picture. And it seems like a dog chasing its tail.
Okay, quickly, it seems like the board is concentrating on keeping the buildings at 100% capacity. But I think the board really should be thinking about the kids and their families. Having a couple of empty classrooms or Northwest is a lot less harmful than what you're doing to these families and moving them around.
On the card it says, please share building capacities of the junior highs. That is not information that this audience has. The junior high capacities are a little different than elementary, but the capacities as we cite them are, Deb, where are you? 800 at Southeast, 800 at Northwest, and 460 at North Central. Now, how do you calculate that? You have kids who move around all day long, right? And so the way it's been calculated historically is you take the number of classrooms, and you have to take out 2 periods a day so that teachers can have their prep time. So you have that percentage of the number of classrooms times the number of periods per day. And that gives you, and then you take it times 25 kids in the classroom, and that's how you get your capacity. Now, teachers, we know that there are not always 25 kids in a classroom. We know that. But those are the numbers that we use now. That certainly is flexible based on special ed classrooms that may have far fewer than 25 and so on.
The gentleman said earlier about understanding other options. It seems strange to be in this meeting and we've only got one option because it kind of limits your thought process on what some of those other options might be and what effort has gone into considering them as a potential solution. One obvious option is to build more capacity at North Central. The university gentleman said it's imminent. It's only a matter of a few years, so why not take that action today and make that decision and commitment and apply some of our tax dollars to that project.
So in listening to the conversation, it seems like there's two issues. Issue number one is that in North Liberty, there's a lot of growth, which is going to cause overcrowding in North Central in the future. It seems like there's a second issue, which is there's also going to be growth, which hasn't been considered between here and west, along the new road there. Not new road, but existing road. So it seems like there's going to be growth in both areas, and we're talking about moving families and not considering this growth. And so I think it's very important that you consider long-term. It seems like this is very short-term focused and not long-term focused, and maybe I'm hitting this same point on the head, but if the problem is growth, you don't solve the problem by moving students when there's going to be future growth in other areas. And so it seems like these projections are somewhat meaningless unless that growth is incorporated into them. And an example of this is the fact that North Central should have included these future projections to build so that they could accommodate this capacity in the first place. And apparently it wasn't, right? It was the same model we have now. And so I guess my question is, why aren't we incorporating this future growth? It seems like a very easy thing to do, to look at building plots that we have, to look at the number of new starts in construction, and include these growth figures into your numbers. Even if you have a number that's spit out of a black box and you know that's not incorporated, you know, I'm an accountant, I run regressions all the time, I could consult you on this for a very cheap fee. So, so it seems very simple to incorporate these types of things into your analysis, and it seems imperative that you do, or you're going to be running into these same problems in the future, because North Liberty is not going to stop growing, and the areas where there's opportunities for new construction aren't going to stop growing, especially if you have families that are mobile and can move. And so it seems like it's very important that you consider these things in your growth projections, or you're going to be revisiting this over and over and over again. So that's just my
question is, how cheap?
Free.
I don't mean to make this lengthy, so I'm going to take a deep breath and try to put my thoughts together. To address the, we should be planning long-term, this looks short-term, I'm a fan of that. I'm a huge fan of that. I was a person who was a part of the redistricting committee when we brought RSP in, so I got to hear all about how they were computing their data, and while it is similar to what Jeffrey does at the university, it was also different. They went minuscule as far as their calculation. They went house by house. Here's this business. Here's how many they've hired in the last year. Here's how many they've laid off. Here's what their pattern is as an industry. They were so detailed in the way they went about it. They cost a small fortune to the district, and year one, their projections were wrong. So while I agree we need to be planning long-term, I really am a proponent of that. If people are fussing about, well, you can't make changes based on projections that are going to happen in 2 years, how accurate is that data? How do you expect the district to create a projection that's 20 years out? That data is going to be in flux. And yes, there are methods you can use, but no method is foolproof. So I also agree it's great to take several different methodologies of projections and predictions and kind of look at the different ones and go, okay, here's a middle ground. Here's kind of what we're seeing. And even that is going to be in flux. So yes, we need to plan long term. Yes, we need to look at trends, but we all have to understand that you're not going to narrow this down within 15 students at any given point. Because jobs change, people change, kids change, people open and enroll, lose jobs, gain jobs, build houses. And RSP absolutely took into account the new development around Borlaug. I know they did. It was discussed. And it didn't change the fact that it looked very similar to this. We were still going to have overcrowding in one school and undercapacity in another.
West Side kids deserve better than a railroaded, behind closed doors, done deal that the board is making a pretend show of listening to the West Side community. Everybody knows city has been clamoring for Wickham for years. The board should consider all the kids and families' welfare. Will they truly seek input to act on? Here's my response. These are good people. They do this for free. They are our elected officials. Let's not hammer them on the head for this. They're doing the best they can, and so are the people down here. Kate says we've got a lot of people that want to move to the elementary process. So last call. I won't finish that sentence. Last call. All right, Dr. White.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think when we're talking about the junior high, historically through the Iowa City School Districts, junior highs and high schools have been talked about together. So if we're going to talk about high school in the fall, let's talk about the junior high in the fall. Or if we're talking about the junior high now, let's not be talking about the high school behind closed doors. And I really do think this committee has put a lot of effort in, and as a former elected official who came in second, I know the board will change. 2 years from now, there'll be a different board. So I really do respect the administration's input into this, because they're going to be living and dying and breathing this left and right for years to come. So I would like to see a little more of a long-term vision, but I think the junior high and high school really should be talked about at the same time. And what I'm actually hearing is we're going to be at capacity with Warlog at Northwest here very soon. North Central's over capacity, so we're at the third high school.
Last call for junior high. Are there any card questions left for junior high? Okay. Tons. We promise, well, I promise the team and everybody here, 8:30 is our end time. We will stay afterwards if you want to give us more comments. Okay? Comments on the cards are part of the record. We type them up and put them in. Okay? So if you have other comments and you want to put them on cards, do that as well.
It's not really a question, it's more of a statement. I'm just a little bit annoyed with the conversation being seats and capacity and predictions. This is actually children with faces and names, and they're not pawns. I just feel like we gotta think about, we're not just filling seats. These are children we're talking about, and we need to consider not only their feelings and concerns, but the family as a whole.
Thank you. Jane, have you pulled up the elementary one? Yes, you have. The elementary scenario, the first one, make sure I'm using the right button here. Here it is. Okay, the issues attempted to be addressed by this are overcrowding at Wood and available space at Twain and Hills. And while we're doing this, we will look to move toward the goal of bringing schools within 20% of the district average of free reduced lunch. Okay, so we have been directed by the Iowa Department of Education and been cited as being isolated in our practices, and where we can, where there are opportunities, we have been asked to attempt to bring more balance in our free reduced lunch pockets. Okay, so the proposal is to move Lake Ridge community, and I'll show you a map here in a second, to Hills from Twain. They were moved from Twain 4 or 5 years ago. Okay. They were moved from Hills to Twain. And Julie says it gets the wishes. So the idea, and actually I went back and found a letter to the parents on that, and the letter said the reason for that was overcrowding in Hills. Well, Hills is not overcrowded. Okay. All I can do is read the letter to read it. Okay, so that's one, and that's 69 kids. Okay? It's literally a triple switch environment. So we take kids from Twain to Hills, take kids from Longfellow to Twain, and take kids from Wood out. Let's see, they go to, I gotta remember, Dolphin Lake Point Enclave goes to Longfellow, and Bon Air, and you can see how many kids are in each, end up at Longfellow. So Longfellow has both kids coming in and kids going out. This orangish color is Twain. The green is Wood. The purple is Longfellow, and it kind of curves around here. The brown is Hills. So you can see that there's also some light green, and those are parks and recreational areas. Okay. So this is the proposed. No, it's not. This is the current. You're right. Thank you. This is Windsor Ridge in here. This is Red Wing Estates. And the reason those are both pulled is that that's all one bus route. There's actually, a couple kids, one kid between there. This is Lake Ridge. So you can see that's 69 kids. And they currently go to Twain. The proposal is to take them to Hills. This is Dolphin Lake and Bon Air that are currently in Wood. The proposal is to take them to Longfellow. And here's the other piece of Longfellow. It kind of has two pieces to it. Here and here. On your documents, you see how many, the numbers of students that are projected as the biggest case scenario if all kids that are in those attendance areas attend those schools. That's how big the schools would be. All right, so let's go with questions and comments on this. The question is, these colors are not, they're proposed to go to, these are proposed to go to Longfellow. They're not purple yet because Julie was right, this is the current map highlighting the areas that are being targeted. Correct.
Earlier you spoke about the idea of sign-up transfers and grandfathering and that no decision was made. So if the proposal here is supposed to be done by May 1st, but the decision about sign-up transfers and grandfathering won't be done, I don't understand how you're moving kids all over from school to school when we still have kids not going to their assigned school and you haven't decided, first of all, if they're going to go back. Second of all, I don't understand how you could grandfather somebody in as to not disrupt where they're at when you're disrupting entire neighborhoods, moving them to new schools. So the process to me seems backwards, that you haven't made a decision about sign-up transfers or grandfathering, but this decision is supposed to come before that. So can you explain why this decision is coming before the grandfathering and sign-up transfer decision?
Well, what I would say is, first of all, we aren't making a decision. We are presenting some options to the board for a year from this coming fall. As far as whether the sign-up legislation is going to change, we do not know. I went back after the last meeting and did some more research. The current legislation says that if a school falls off the sign-up list, but students have transferred because of their homeschool being on the sign-up list, that they should be allowed to continue their education through that building, which for us would be 6th grade. So that's the best I can tell you right now. We are in a state of flux, that's true.
Does should be allowed mean you have to allow it, I guess?
Yes, that would be my interpretation of it, but I'm not a lawyer. And those were my words, I mean, not my interpretation of it also.
Legally, are you required to do that, I guess?
We believe so, but again, I'm not an attorney. What we think we are legally required to do by the rules for school in need of assistance, which is part of the Title I legislation, if a child transfers out of their home school due to sign-up, and then their home school drops off the sign-up list, that child is allowed to stay at their transferred school until they're finished with their career in that building, which for Iowa City would be 6th grade. And that's what we believe is the current legislation and our interpretation of it. However, I guess where the question comes is, No Child Left Behind going to be repealed or not?
What's Iowa's, are they applying for a waiver, and in that waiver?
Yes, we have applied for a waiver, and when we're going to hear, we don't really know. I mean, there's just a lot of uncertainty, as well as the governor's reform plan too, and the impact that it will have.
And what's the 20%? Is that any sort of state requirement, or is it an ideal? What's thinking on the 20% balance?
That's the state, and also we're trying to look at being close to the district average for free and reduced lunch.
Is it a state requirement?
It's not a state requirement. And in fact, we know the courts have backed way off on busing based on statuses. But we were cited at our most recent review by the State Department of Education for having socially and racially isolated schools. And we were directed, although it doesn't have, I mean, I don't know if someone comes in and swoops in and says, you didn't take that opportunity. We are directed when we have opportunities to fix that.
So is the school district also then working, I used to teach in a large district in a metropolitan area, and when a new area was developed and it was developing, in that area you had to have a broad range of socioeconomic families. And in our planning and zoning in Iowa City and Coralville, has that been factored into this large? We keep talking about the long-range planning, but this is more about schools. This is about our entire community. And so when we're developing communities, is this something we're factoring into the entire piece?
That is probably beyond our scope of authority. That would be a good question for the Iowa City, the Coralville, the University Heights, North Liberty City Councils and city planning.
I think that's what's happened, is that...
Andy? Yeah.
So as I look at these numbers, it looks, from what I remember from the website of capacity, these schools are at capacity, and some of them even way over. And so as you look at the west side of over capacity, you look at the east side of way over capacity, it seems like there is no way you can shift boundaries to solve that problem. So given every community in the entire area wants their kids to go to school with their community, can't we think about the capacity issue on the premise that we all want community schools?
Okay, Deb has a question up here.
I think I'd like to know a little bit more about how we got to this process particularly, and maybe find out what was the district's rationale in giving such a narrow charge to the leadership committee, where it seems like redistricting is the only tool in the toolbox to solve the problems that the committee was charged with. You know, if you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail or something like that, but you are only applying one possible remedy rather than potentially investing in additions to existing buildings or new facilities. And why does that seem to be off the table for the leadership teams that have been charged with solving these capacity issues, balancing FRL issues? And did the school board have a hand in setting that charge, or was that strictly the district that made those decisions?
This is the superintendent's leadership team, okay? So this is not an official board committee, okay? And I will state from my perspective, you know, that's not up to me to walk into the board and say, build a $13 million building, unless the board says, this is the vision that we have. The purpose of going this year by year is to do the best we can with the most difficult challenges facing us in the short term. Now, and I understand, and we receive that feedback, that it feels like it's not also considering medium and long term. We have immediate needs at Wood. Wood has, we've got to solve that. And any scenario we'll come up with now isn't even implemented for another year, for good reason, to have people adjust. We will have well over 500 kids at Wood Elementary School, of which what percent are needy children? 73% now. So that's an immediate need. So regardless of whether it bakes into a medium or long term, that's got to be solved. And you know, we don't solve it by adding on to Wood and making it a 700 student school. So that's one answer, Dan, to your statement.
But if Senate is repealed, we'll have 600 kids that have to go there next year, potentially.
There are about 600 kids who live in the Wood attendance area. That's correct.
There's just not enough classrooms for growth.
Yeah, that's and Dan, what you're getting to is a good point, and we talked about it at the last meaning is that there are capacity needs at the elementary level at the east, on the east side. There's Steve, he wants to, oh, Steve's going to hand it.
So there's a little positive air in here. Some of us are here to support this new plan that the leadership team has done. For utilizing current facilities and addressing overcrowding, and I commend you for making the schools more heterogeneous. So thank you.
I have a couple of questions or comments. Follow up on the heterogeneous comment. In order to ensure an equitable education for all students, academically, you're going to have to differentiate in the classroom a lot more than you're doing now. And the capacity analysis seems very superficial. Is someone going to go through each building, look at the actual physical space in the room, and ensure that you can differentiate instruction so that students of all abilities will receive an adequate education? My second comment is I have a son who receives speech services at an older school in the district, an elementary school, in what appeared to be a closet. If you add more many students,
I think they're chuckling because some of them have their class in a closet, which you're really in a closet.
Closet's classroom is a project that we've done this week.
Well, my concern is if you add more needy students to any particular school, you're going to need more resources to help those students succeed academically. Is there the physical capacity to do that? And are you going to be taking away time that the AEA personnel could be using to help students by making them travel more? Thank you.
I just want to say I'm glad to hear that you were looking at the possible impact that it would be if the waiver happens and what happens to those students. Are they required by law to stay at the school that they started at, or can we remove that grandfathering? I'm glad to hear that you're saying that, but I think we need to take that even further before that decision is made. There are states who've already been granted waivers. I know that the school district has attorneys. I think that we need to investigate how that impacted in other states, other school districts, because it's obviously, I mean, we're not an island. This is going to happen in other places too. I'm just curious to hear and to find out how that's impacting school districts in other states that have been granted the waivers. Are those students legally required to stay at the school that they started, or can the school district decide to redraw the lines and have no grandfathering, everyone goes where they're supposed to go in terms of attendance areas, and then the decision is made about where the lines need to be drawn? I think that that's more research that needs to be done before a decision is made. And I know you're saying that there's not a decision made in May, but you have to make a recommendation by May, which is a part of a decision. And if I was a board member, I would not want that recommendation before the information is gathered, the complete information, the complete picture.
Just a follow-up comment on that. I think what you brought up are two related but separate issues. One would be determined by federal law as far as if students, because of sign-up regulations, stay in the school they've transferred to, or that's null and void. But then the other one would, in my mind anyway, involve local decisions or a district decision on transfers, whether or not students would be allowed to apply and transfer out of their home neighborhood, or if everybody who lives in a boundary of a school would be required to attend there, and that would be board policy.
I understand that, and I think that, again, if a kid who is transferring out of Twain doesn't have to go to Twain, then why does my kid who lives in Windsor Ridge have to move to a different school?
Yes, and I understand.
So I think that, I mean, that is a separate thing too, but what I think is we can learn from the states that have already gone through this. We can learn from the school districts that have already gone through this, or are going through the process right now. We're not the first, so we actually we're in a good spot, I think, in terms of we can learn from who's going through it already.
And we can contact our own Iowa Department of Education to see what information they have from other states and then follow up on that. That's a good suggestion.
That's
Thank
great.
you. Yeah.
We've got a microphone right there.
I identified myself last time I spoke, so I guess I'll do it again. I'm Jason Lewis. I'm the president of the PTO at Twain Elementary. And I want to, there's a lot of this talk about free and reduced lunch numbers. I want to say to you, the committee, to the teachers who are working in overcrowded schools, I want to say thank you. This is a thankless job. And you guys have, I believe, done as much as you possibly could to find the best possible solution given your charge. So what I want to say is something that I wrote about a little bit in the newspaper today. The idea that, as I understand it, and I don't have a PhD in education, but the way that research has been explained to me and the way that you guys have looked at research is when free and reduced lunch numbers come down close to the 50% level, it not only helps the kids who receive free and reduced lunch, it also helps the kids in the classroom who don't receive free and reduced lunch because the resources that are in that classroom aren't as taxed. Am I correct in that assumption? So it's important to remember this as a community, that I know that it would be difficult for anyone. I would be upset if my child was being taken out of the school and put into another school to balance numbers one way or the other. I understand that frustration. But as a community, as somebody who believes that every child deserves a fair shake and equal and equitable education in our schools, I think you guys are doing the best that you can. I think the numbers that you're showing here are moving in the right direction. I hope that everybody understands that that's the point. And maybe there is, down the road, a way that we can dovetail an idea for another elementary school to be built, along with balancing these numbers and helping kids in schools like Twain that has 71% free and reduced lunch. Now you guys are saying Wood has 74, 73%, and Twain has been as high as 80, Julie tells me. I think it's important to understand that it's hurting all the kids in that school based on the research that the committee has sourced. So I think I'm just saying that as a statement to sort of balance this conversation so that everybody has a baseline level for understanding why free and reduced lunch is an important number to consider.
Teacher at Grantwood Elementary. Grantwood is an amazing school, and when he was talking about Twain, I kind of teared up because it made me think of our school and our amazing kids. We have amazing kids, amazing students, and some of the most amazing teachers. And I want people to know that they think, oh, you hear things around town, you hear people say, that's the poor school, that's where the bad teachers are. Well, when you see the numbers, the free and reduced numbers, like these kids, they don't have the opportunities. I'm going to cry because they don't have what everyone else has. We need to give them the best, and as a community, we need to provide that for them. I'm a special education teacher with a philosophy that inclusion is the best policy for schools and for all children. See research on inclusion. Children of differing abilities, those with special needs, differing races, differing skin color, experiences, beliefs, religion, family income, should all be together in the same schools. The research noted tonight states that students with low SES benefit from being integrated, with students of higher SES. There is also benefits for the students with higher SES. So we've talked a lot about how it benefits these students with low SES, but we haven't touched on how it benefits these students of higher SES. We have amazing opportunity here. Think of this as an opportunity. Think of the real-life lessons that come about each day in a school that is mixed. Everyone is learning how to interact with each other and get along, despite their differences, specifically the differences with family income. This is a huge life lesson. If you cannot get along with all types of people, you will not go far in life. It is our responsibility as a community to make our schools real-world-like, to prepare our students for the real world. Our students need the academic tools and the tools for social skills to be successful in this world. We must provide that for them. Please support a redistricting plan that allows for students of high SES, middle SES, and low SES to learn and learn from each other.
sign-in transfer waivers. I think something that needs to be considered is, will busing take place after the fact? Because I think a lot of the kids that are assigned sign-in transfer would no longer be a sign-in transfer. The district is no longer legally required to bus them.
Well, all I can do is give you the prediction. The prediction is that funding is going to decrease and possibly totally go away for busing. That the legislation and the follow-up studies and that they have done on the impact of busing have not proven out as being a good use of the money. But that's, again, just opinion at this point in time. But that's kind of the initial information that we're getting when we've had one of our administrators in Washington, D.C. talking to Grassley and Harkin and Lopesac. But again, prediction. And yes, and that is true, that the district has already now with incoming kindergarten students, we're shifting more of our money to provide the after-school programming tutoring support with incoming kindergartners. That started this year, and we will continue that, assuming that our SINA and rules stay in place for this next year.
These cards, Kate has sorted these cards for us. These cards have a lot of comments about high school and how that plays into this. And so I want you to know that these will be recorded, but we're moved into the elementary phase, and so these cards are elementary questions. So I just wanted to note that. We're not ignoring those, they'll be recorded for high school content. So let's do a couple of elementary questions. So I'm going to ask a question that Becky gets to answer. How is the board and the committee addressing the racial segregation found in the district?
Okay, so how is the board and this committee addressing the racial segregation found in Iowa City Community School District? We often find that so many things are tied very closely together. The racial segregation, the free and reduced lunch. So as we address one of these factors, we address many others as we work through this. So that's the best answer that I can give. And that's what we're trying to work with, the free and reduced lunch. And we...
With the resources?
No, it doesn't. It does not equate, and I don't want to be interpreted as saying that, Julie. Thank you. I do not. When you look at the research on student achievement, the closest tie is to free and reduced lunch, rather than ethnic or racial background. So that's why we're choosing to focus on that. Thank you.
The resources go with free and reduced lunch as kids should.
Well, Title I services are provided based on buildings being above the district average. We only receive so many funds, and from that we have to make difficult decisions. We have more buildings that qualify for Title I services than we have funds to service. So we start with the highest need building and make our decisions from there on how far we can go. There are other things that you can consider. You can look at perhaps if you wanted to serve more buildings, perhaps you could only provide Title I services for perhaps to just the primary grades. K through 3, at this point we haven't done that, but that is something as a district every late summer when we have our allocation and we look at our free and reduced lunch, then we try to figure out where we can place our teachers with our Title I. We have had some buildings that previously received Title I services and no longer do. Penn is one that I can think of right off the top of my head.
Do you get more money if Longfellow becomes a title school?
No. We don't get, no, we don't. We get a district allocation, and how we divide that is split, is a district decision.
So
and
can you hear this? There's no benefit in them actively trying to get people who are eligible to apply for it.
Well, it's based on the district average. And it's actually, there's a state allocation for Title I funds, and then the state decides how it's spread throughout all the districts and across the state of Iowa. And what I will say is I don't think we should anticipate that we're going to have additional Title I funding. It has been cut for at least the last 5 years, and this is only my second year in this district, but in my previous district we were having similar things where the Title I funds were cut. We had a little reprieve a couple years ago when we got the ARA funding, and we stimulus. So that we could hire some additional teachers, but that money's gone, and so are the additional teachers.
Here's a question. I guess it's as much an idea as a question. Couldn't the board make Twain and Wood magnet schools that focus on math, science, or the arts, or start an open application process? So that's something to consider. This parent says, I would love to consider that sort of attractor to a school.
And that could be considered, and there are districts, and they're generally large urban districts that have done that. I know Des Moines has had a couple of magnet schools. Sometimes they're tied into the fine arts. My understanding is that Sabin, which was the old administrative building, when one of our current principals was a student here, that was a science magnet building. And that would have probably been, geez, I don't want to give away her age. She's not here tonight anyway. 30 years or so ago. So I think Iowa City has in the past had magnet buildings. Oh, quite a while ago? No? More than that? Okay. I was being kind, sorry. Yeah. Okay, what specifically do schools such as Wood not have in terms of resources that other schools have? It's not so much what they don't have. They do have Title I services that maybe some of the other buildings with higher poverty don't. It's just a matter of, do we have enough district resources to provide class sizes of 14 or 15? No, we don't. They have class sizes that are the same as the district average. They do have food, and sometimes higher, yes. And they do have the lunch and the breakfast program. And Kate, you have it set up now so all students at Wood can have breakfast. We're working at that. Yes. So that's, I guess, the best way to answer that. If I'd ask any of our principals here, they all wish they had more.
This card says, I believe, and I'm going through cards I think we've already addressed, so that's kind of my discretion, I guess, but I believe there is a misunderstanding about Longfellow being socially and racially elite based on the reported 12.9% free reduced lunch numbers. Many families don't apply to receive free reduced lunch because they are concerned about healthy eating and want to eat food from home. We're a wonderful mixed school with families from a multitude of racial and social backgrounds. This one is an idea as well as a question. They say, why get Longfellow in the mix? Why the triple switch? And why not just do a Twain, Hills, Wood scenario? And that's something the leadership team has discussed. Of course, we would be sacrificing that attempt to balance a free reduced lunch, but that's something that we're gathering data on.
So I don't understand how balancing free and reduced lunch actually solves it. And all it does to me is like taking a bunch of kids from Dolphin Lake, 2 buses full, 82, a bus, it has less capacity than 2, so there's $80,000 there. You're taking them, you're driving them past Twain and to Longfellow. Now you have Longfellow that is taking care of these kids, and is there an allotment of resources that go along, extra allotment that goes along with these kids? It just seems to be a true dilution of the number. There's not an intervention happening. I don't know where the achievement gap, how it is reduced. I just see it as an arbitrary, we're just gonna lower the number.
Okay, we'll take that into consideration when we meet again in your comment on that. Okay, another question?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to that. Do we know that these overall numbers are actually concrete or observed process where some kids may be receiving it and shouldn't, and vice versa? And then if we're going to do all these adjustments based on those numbers, do we need to look at that closer?
Okay, I tell you what I know of the federal guidelines on free and reduced lunch. Parents can apply for free and reduced lunch, and in that process, they are required to provide proof through like a pay stub or something that their tax report that then is free to determine whether they qualify for free or reduced, or they don't qualify at all. So, yes. I mean, you just can't fill out the form and say. You have to have some type of proof. And then generally what happens is annually somebody from the State Department comes in and does an audit. Now, my previous experience with how the audit was done, they would select a random number, like 15, and every 15th one, they would pull that application and verify whether or not that parent, whether the family qualified or not. And if they did not, then those services were pulled. As someone said at Longfellow, it is dependent on whether parents apply or not, and we have some parents for a variety of reasons that would qualify, but just choose not to go down that option. We generally see that more in the secondary than the elementary.
We're looking for new ones first. We got a new one?
In actuality, it's probably the exact opposite of what you're saying. I've spoken to a great many Longfellow parents who are very clear that it's a health-conscious neighborhood. I mean, they're making their kids' lunches and sending them to school because they feel that it's healthier. And they're just now realizing how that impacts their funding and also the perception of their school. So there's actually somewhat of a drive to get parents who are eligible for free and reduced lunch to apply, whether they're going to take advantage of the lunch or not, to get more accurate, to show more accurate numbers. But especially at Longfellow, that's something I've heard consistently, is that they're actually underreported. And they can't do anything about it. You can't make somebody apply for it just because they're eligible.
Okay, first I want to thank everyone, I don't need this, for doing this. You're my friends, you're my colleagues, you're my boss. I've had the privilege to teach at Hills and at Longfellow. I'm a parent of 3 at Longfellow. I'm also one of the co-drafters of the petition to address east side crowding with the possible new elementary school on our side of town, because it is not just Wood that is experiencing overcrowding. That being said, I just want to remind, one of the questions that was brought up at the last forum was a parent asked for the 4 schools that were listed, Hills, Twain, Longfellow, and Wood, and they did ask also if we could include Hoover on this, because they take a tremendous amount of sign-up transfers. Could we please get some data if the No Child Left Behind waiver goes through and we don't have bus funding, and we ask all these parents and their children to stay in their neighborhood schools? So the 130 that leave Twain, if we ask them to stay at Twain, what does that do to their capacity of the building? What does that do to their free and reduced lunch numbers? Before we go any further, because that is a decision that quite possibly may be made, as we've all discussed, but I think we would all, in the public, like to see those figures before we hound you any further, before we ask you to change what you're doing. Could we at least gather that information? And if we need to include other schools like Hoover, that's not on here, could we please include that information on Hoover? And Longfellow, I know, there are 20 students, I live in Windsor Ridge, that I know of offhand that do not attend Longfellow, that open enroll, not because they were in a assignment building, they just open enroll to attend the school their kids began their career at as kindergartners and wanted to finish as 6th graders. So I know it affects Longfellow as well. So if we could see some information, we would really appreciate it.
And we're currently working on that and putting it together. We just don't quite have it ready to go on the website because we're double checking some things.
And I think that's just where we can just take one step, breathe. I know you have a time frame, but if we can just do this right for once, we'll be so much more apt to trust you guys that you really are looking long term for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Mindy?
How many elementary schools do we have in the Iowa City School District?
We have 19.
So we're trying to balance free and reduced lunch at 4 of the 19. I would assume that the state did not tell us to balance free and reduced lunch in part of our district. I would assume they told us to bring it within the 20% district-wide. If that should be part of the criteria, I would suggest it be looked at district-wide.
Okay, I will say that last year
we are addressing other issues. That's not the primary focus of our redistricting. It is important, I'm not going to minimize it, but our primary focus is at the top: overcrowding at Wood, underutilization at Hills and Twain. While we are doing that, we are going to be addressing the free reduced lunch status. But duly noted that some people believe that we should do the whole thing we did, a couple of years ago again, and look at the whole district. I mean, that's duly noted.
What's the rationale for Lucas not being involved? I'm just curious why Lucas was not part of this, the right of that neighborhood and part of that mix. And number two, the notion of an East Side Elementary School, is that a community initiative, or is the board seriously considering that? Has there been discussion at the board level about taking silo funds to support an East Side, a new East Side school, elementary school?
Okay, the first question is why not Lucas? The answer is Lucas was not identified as a critical area, but that's something that we can look at Lucas and how that would play into scenarios.
What does critical area mean?
When I say critical, I mean overcrowded to the point of not able to handle those kids. And that's the most serious issue right now is Wood. There's also some issues in North Liberty. Penn School is of a concern, but we honestly couldn't get a solution there because there isn't room close by. So that's the definition of that. Now your second point was, has the board discussed building an East Side elementary school? Well, they've got a bunch of signatures on a petition. Have they discussed it as a board? I have not witnessed that, and I've been at facility meetings. Certainly they've talked about the petition, but they haven't said, yeah, let's consider this. Do I think that that's something, I mean, if you've got 500 signatures on a petition, if they're wise and they're listening to the public, they're going to talk about that. But they're also going to talk about the other people who feel differently about that as well.
I don't think I should represent our school if I can't turn the microphone. We have a huge growth curve at Grantwood Elementary. I think that there are a couple of themes that have come up tonight, and one of the big ones is sacrifice, and another one is that these statistics are not just numbers, they're faces. And I know when I was teaching today, I was looking at the faces of my kids, and I was trying to figure out which one would I want to go to another school. And I wouldn't be able to name one. It would be like, parting with one of my own biological children. But then I think about what I do as a parent. I sacrifice and do what's best for my child. Just like I didn't want my son to go far away to school, but I did it because that's what was best for him. And I think as a community and as a teacher at Grant Wood, when I look at those faces, I have to go beyond my own selfish need to see them every day and hug them every day and think about what's best for their long-term education. And when I think about that and I read the research, because I'm trying to find some studies out there that say if I just work harder or get smarter, I'm going to be able to do this for the kids. And as an instructional coach, I think if I could just find something that would make it easier for the teachers that I am honored to work with each day to do their jobs without going home and being completely exhausted emotionally and physically, I do it. But it keeps coming back to the fact that I'm going to have to say goodbye to some of these kids to do what's best for them. And I think as a community, we all have to make some sacrifices to do what's best for our kids.
You touched on this, but I think very important things are happening here. But you do need to consider North Liberty and Penn, where we are already overcrowded, and we are also using closets, and we don't have nearly as high free and reduced numbers, but we still have important needs that we will not have enough classrooms in the fall. We've got an entire grade level in my children in subpar temporaries. They're losing the heat, they're falling apart, and it's a district-wide issue, but yeah, this is great stuff. Yes, it needs to be addressed, but truly, what are we going to do for my kids also this fall when we've got at least one classroom that we have nowhere to put?
Okay, thank you.
One more? Okay, well, we thank you for coming.
And if we all looked at it like that, instead of, you know, what's best for my kid, and can't someone else move instead of mine, if we all looked at it as the fact that everybody, regardless of socioeconomic status, race, religion, neighborhood, everybody, even the rural kids, want the same thing. They want to go to the school that's closest to them, that they perceive as a neighborhood school. They want to remain in their community, and everybody wants this. And if we all looked at it from that viewpoint, instead of turning into factions of who's for what and throw this person or this school under the bus instead of mine, this would go much better. And with PATV taping this tonight, which is the first time it's happened, and this being rebroadcast on the school district website and on PATV, you guys are putting a human face on every concern out there, not just mine, but everybody's. And when we make it about people and think about how it affects other people, we're able to put ourselves in each other's shoes, and we're going to come up with better decisions that we can all live with more easily afterwards as well.
I'm Dan Shaw. I'm a parent at Longfellow Elementary. My daughter Avery goes there. She's in kindergarten, just started this year. So a group of parents on the east side of Iowa City in the elementary level, we got together as a byproduct of the redistricting proposals and processes that have come out in the last month or so. We really started to take a look at the numbers of capacity on the east side elementary schools. We found out that 6 elementary schools are currently over capacity, and the others have limited space, you know, a net total of 150 open seats on the east side elementary schools that feed into City High. And looking at growth projections for where students are going to be coming into those classes, where as the younger birth classes come up into the schools over the next few years, those open seats, even if we were able to get up to 100% capacity and fill up all those seats in the classrooms, those seats are going to be gone as well. So it really seems like now is the time, and we put together a petition to the school board and the superintendent, Steve Murley, outlining our concerns that we need to build more elementary capacity on the east side, but also around the district. You know, there's issues at Penn Elementary in North Liberty. There's capacity issues at Kirkwood, where they're in Coralville, where they're using all kinds of portable classrooms to meet their classroom needs. You know, there's quite a few capacity issues on the horizon for the district, with a huge uptick in student population growth that we're experiencing. We added 442 students to the district this year, and if that trend were to continue, we would rapidly be out of elementary school space, and our kids would be even more overcrowded in classrooms than they are today. So we presented that petition to the board on Tuesday night. They had a facilities committee work session prior to that board meeting this past Tuesday, where they laid out plans to look at all building projects in the district, to look at the funding streams in combination with that, for silo funding, a local sales option, a sales tax option, to look at PEPL funding, which is also for buildings and technology, and to take a look at the funding streams that were available, to take a look at all the building projects that are potential on the horizon in the district, and start to establish some priorities here. As soon as they learn more about enrollment numbers, new enrollment projections in the coming months, they'll take a good hard look at those and figure out where the district's priorities lie, and set some priorities as a school board for building in the future to meet those enrollment needs. So that's very encouraging that was a new development this week, and they were very receptive to the feedback from our petition, so I certainly appreciated that on their part, and I hope it does lead to at least a conversation and an investigation of how we can meet capacity needs on the east side of Iowa City, particularly at the elementary level. The board has done a great job in years past of meeting capacity needs in North Liberty with Garner Elementary that was recently opened, in Coralville with Borlaug Elementary on the west side. So they've stayed ahead of the game in those parts of the district, but haven't quite had the same track record of success on the east side yet. So we're hoping that they continue to step up and provide that capacity to keep our kids' educational experience effective moving forward.
All right, hi, I'm Jason Lewis. I'm the PTO president of Mark Twain Elementary, and I'm here tonight at this community forum on redistricting, just to show support for what the redistricting committee is trying to do. They've identified on the east side of Iowa City that there's overcrowding at Wood Elementary, there's underutilization of the resources at Mark Twain and Hills, and there's a disparity in free and reduced lunch percentages in both the Wood and Mark Twain elementary schools. So they're trying to bring those numbers into
into a little bit more in line with the district average, at least within reason, within the possibility at this point. The reason that I support this and support this conversation is that Iowa City is a great town with great schools all across the board, Mark Twain and Wood included. And I think it's important to have these conversations to understand what dynamics go into making the best possible education for all the kids in the district. It's important to understand that in any decision like this, there's never going to be a perfect solution for everyone. And I guess my involvement, what I can bring to the table is hopefully just to try and be another voice for understanding, compromise, and putting the kids first. So that's why I'm here. It's my understanding that free and reduced lunch is an indicator for potential classroom performance for students, and the higher the percentage of free and reduced lunch in a given school brings greater challenges to the staff and the teachers in that school to provide the quality of education that they want to all the students across the board. So the idea of bringing the free and reduced lunch numbers down to at least close to the 50% number is, again, as I understand it, not being an education PhD, but as it's been explained to me and research has been cited, is that if you bring the numbers for free and reduced lunch down to close to the 50% level, then that brings about an equality in the ability of the teachers and the children to effectively learn in the classroom. The teachers' resources aren't stretched too thin. The barriers of the students are more balanced. I mean, it's difficult to talk about these things because it feels like when you're talking about free and reduced lunch, you're talking about poor versus not poor. But that's not always the case. There are plenty of families who receive free and reduced lunch that aren't what you would consider that. So I guess it's important to dissuade people of the idea of poor versus not poor, rich versus poor, whatever, and the idea of bringing a balance to the classroom where everyone can learn together in the most effective way possible. There's research that supports this, and I think the school district is doing a great job of attempting to find the best possible solution for balancing those numbers that they can at this point.
Well, I was very happy with the turnout. It was a very large turnout at our forum tonight, and I just think it's very important that as a committee we get to hear all these ideas. We will meet again and generate more ideas based on what we've heard tonight. I know we'll be looking at some more scenarios for the junior high and also the elementary, and we'll come back once more and present those to the public at another forum just like this.
Hi, my name is Molly Severson. I'm a resource teacher at Grantwood Elementary, and I'm here tonight at the redistricting meeting, really supporting Grantwood and our students. Grantwood is an amazing school with amazing teachers, amazing students, amazing staff, and we're here to advocate for our students. There's a couple things that are going on with the redistricting. Grantwood is overflowing. I mean, it's too many kids. We started this project at our school this year called Closets to Classrooms. My classroom is in a closet right now. A lot of teachers are in janitor's closets. So that's one problem, obviously, that needs to be addressed. First and foremost, as the superintendents, or the assistant superintendent said tonight. But then also, the second thing, which I think is equally as important, really, is distributing the poverty within our community. Right now, we have schools like Wood and Twain and Kirkwood where much of the poverty within our community, all those students go to that same school. Does that make sense? I don't know how I'm not saying that correctly, but we have a high poverty at these schools. So Grantwood has around 70% free and reduced lunch, which means about 70% poverty, and that's not okay. That's not okay because you put all the kids in one school that have all these needs, and we can't meet all their needs. Even if we have exceptional teachers, even if we have exceptional resources, their needs cannot be met. So what we're proposing is that some of that poverty is spread out within the community, and that these students are mixed within the community. And we think that research has shown that it's going to help all my group over there is kind of, they're whispering, Team Grant Wood. Okay, so yeah, it's my posse over there. But anyway, there's some great teachers over there. We propose that some of these students and some of the students at Grant Wood and some of the students, I think also at Twain, would be spread out within the community, and that some of the students at the other schools would come to our school to kind of have a better balance of SES, and that's what seems like what is right, and that seems what's going to be best for our students. I was talking just a moment ago about the research that we were noting. Students of low SES, when they go into others, they are spread out among a district and not just exclusively at one school, or spread out in the district, do much better if they're not just at one school. Much better than even if you would just throw all the resources at one school with all these kids that are high in poverty. But then I spoke tonight and I said that it's not only those kids with low SES that are going to benefit, it's also the students at these other schools with middle income, high income families, because they need those real life experiences of dealing with people, all kinds of people of different races, people of different backgrounds, people of different religions, people of different with different family incomes. And that's what we're all here tonight to support that.